Hi everyone, Jessica here and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video we're going to be looking at the newest issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft, and this is issue 204. So here's what we got with this issue's magazine. So it's come with a paper pad as well, and so I'm pretty sure you get two of each of these designs, and they are double-sided. And I just think these papers are really lovely. They're a little bit different, and I think they go really well with the set. Then we got our wildflower phrases. And this is a 20 stamp and stencil set. As you can see, this stencil, you've got your little mason jar, and then you've got your flowers and your sentiments as your stamps. So just a quick flick through the actual magazine itself. So there's a really great interview with Simon Haley in this month's issue. There's some ink resistant techniques which I might try out. But let's have a look at the inspiration pages that go with the free stamp and stencil set. So as you can see, we've got the mason jar, and you can make this look really realistic with the flowers coming out of the jar itself, and they've got some really lovely sentiments which will fit into that jar as well. And they've got step-by-step instructions with pictures showing you how to stencil your jar, and then use a post-it note, pop over it so you can make it look like your flowers are coming out of the jar. Overall, I think this is a really beautiful stamp set and stencil set, so let's see what we can create using it. So first thing we're going to look at is the stencil. We're going to go ahead and ink the mason jar. So to get started, we're just going to prep the stencil itself. So we're just going to create a mask all the way around the mason jar, because we don't want to be inking through it and then just accidentally catching one of the images surrounding it. So this is a good idea just to do this little bit of prep before you begin your inking. So I think this mason jar is perfect. You'll be able to use it on so many different projects, because it is really versatile. You could literally have so many things coming out of it, not just flowers. Some of the sentiments that come with the stamp set have been designed to fit within that mason jar space. I really like this idea because it's almost like putting a label on the jar. Again, some of the sentiments are really, really good, so you've got to send in good, healthy vibes your way. I didn't really forget your birthday, I just forgot to let you know that I remembered. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So when I first seen this mason jar stencil, I started to think about how I wanted to decorate it, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So I decided to actually stencil through it again, and this way it would put a pattern on the mason jar itself. So as you can see here, I've got one of these Woodware stencils. This is a dissolved mesh stencil, but I will sort of link all the products down in the description below. So all I'm going to do is just using the same colour. So I've inked it to begin with sort of the residual ink that's still in my blending brush. But now I'm just going to sort of load up my brush again and sort of put a much heavier ink through the stencil. So just using the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide, and this is Seedless Preserve. And this is just going to decorate our mason jar and just make it look a little bit cooler. So I'm going to do this before I take my mason jar stencil off, obviously because you want it to be within. So what has happened is I got just a little bit of ink go outside of my masked area. So this is why it's really important to mask off those other images, just so this doesn't happen on your actual project. So I've just gone ahead and cleaned my stencils off, and now we're going to create a mask using a post-it note, just like they've done in the magazine. So the instructions in the magazines say just to draw around the image, but since I've got my blending brush out, I'm just going to use some of the residual ink just to make that impression on my post-it note. And all I'm going to do then is just cut around it, and that will give us our mask. So you will want to go ahead and create a mask if you're planning to stencil directly onto your project and you want your flowers to look like they're coming out of the jar. Alternatively, you could stencil it onto a piece of cardstock and just fussy cut it out from there. You can reuse this mask over and over again as long as it's still sticky, so definitely keep it with your stamp and stencil set, so when you come to this project again, you've already got your mask there. I'll just show you how you can use these other flowers and leaf stencils just to fill your mason jar, or just use it as a little bit of background, then you can put the stamped images on top. So exactly the same like we did with the mason jar. We're just going to mask off the images just around our chosen stencil, and just sort of using the residual ink again that's in the blending brush. We're just going to create this really nice subtle background. So you could just fill your mason jar with these stenciled images, or you could do this just as sort of a background filler, and use the stamps that came with the magazine to then create sort of a fuller bouquet from this mason jar. So once you're happy with your stenciling or your stamped images, you can go ahead and take your mask off and reveal the flowers inside the mason jar. So all I've got here is just one of the stamps that is being cut out, and you can see then how you can begin to sort of build this up with those background stencil images, and then just put in the coloured stamped images inside. For me personally, if I'm going to use these stamped images, I would probably stencil my mason jar onto a separate piece of paper and fussy cut it, pop it on a foam pad and just give it a little bit of dimension, and it would hide then the bottom of your stamped images. So when I first played with these products, I sort of concentrated on the mason jars themselves. And again, I was really interested in how you can make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit different. So you can see here other examples where I've used the stencils that are just in my craft stash, and I've just stenciled on top of the mason jar stencil to give it that little bit of design. So I think these make the jars really modern. And I'm excited to see what other projects I can use these mason jars for. So let's take a look at the stamps side of this set. So I really love you've got the bunches of flowers, you've got the individual flowers, and then you've got some of the sort of bits that you can put in between some of the foliage, and that would just sort of fill that mason jar up nicely. So we're just going to stamp some of the images so we can see what they look like, and then we're going to look at sort of cutting them out and again fill in a mason jar with these lovely flowers. So these are really good quality polymer stamps, and they stamped really beautifully. There was only sort of a couple of sections where I felt I had to restamp it, hence why I'm using my stamping platform. So I'm going to fill most of this sheet with these stamped images, and this is a really good time saver because you can stamp all of these images in one go. So we'll be leaving that little bit of a gap because some of the single-headed flowers and some of the foliage, I do want to have sort of a couple of them, so I'm just going to restamp them. For those of you who have watched a couple of my other videos where I have stamped images, you'll know that I absolutely couldn't live without my stamping platform. And again, if you want to stamp multiple images like this to be cut out or die cut out, whatever, this is a really fantastic time saver because like that you can just do it all in one go. So just a couple of the other sentiments that come with this stamp set. I think they're really fantastic, great for lots of different occasions. Birthdays are good for you. The more you have, the longer you live. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Quite humorous as well. So definitely be reaching for these, I think, for a lot of my projects in the future. So we've stamped all our images. I think these are really beautiful. I think the detail in them, they look really realistic. And I think they're going to look really beautiful on a card. Now we've got our stamped images all done, I want to talk about cutting them out. So as far as I'm aware, there's no coordinating dies that go with this stamp set, and for me personally, I am awful at fussy cutting. So if ever there's a stamp I want cut out and I don't have a die, or perhaps I've downloaded a digi-stamp, I will always go to my scan and cut machine to cut that image out. So this is the Brother CM900 machine. And among all the incredible things this machine can do, this is probably the one feature that I do use most, like I said, because I'm not very good at fussy cutting. So how this works is you put your images onto the cutting mat, and then you actually scan it into the machine. The machine reads the images. It will register the outline of the image, and what you can do is add a little seam allowance or a little border around it, so it gives you that little white border, the same as what a die would. So these Brother Scan and Cut machines are very much a considered purchase. I've had mine for about a year now, and like I said, this is probably what I use it most for. There are so many other amazing things this machine can do. Certainly that would have a whole string of its own videos. I would love to do videos on my scan and cut machine. Unfortunately, I don't really have the space to be able to film it very well, so that's why I've been a little bit hesitant doing so. So this was just really basically filmed on my iPad, so please excuse the not so great camera work here. But I really just wanted to show you how I usually cut out my images. Like I said, I've seen a lot of other people fussy cut, and I wish it was something that I could do, but I just really can't get the hang of it. This machine is so incredible. It will literally pick up every single detail from your image. If you were to draw a straight line and ask it to cut it out, it would pick every lump and bump that that pen stroke has made, even if it looks incredibly straight. So to cut out all those images, that took exactly 2 minutes. And as you can see here, we've got the wastage that it's cut out from, and then we've got our real perfectly cut images. And then, like I said, it's got that really nice sort of white border around it like you'd get with a die. So you could keep the sort of negative space there, and again, you could use that as a stencil if you wanted to and just mask it the same way we have. But I just think this machine is so incredible. So now our images are ready to be coloured in if you choose. So I'm just going to show you one example here of using the alcohol markers. So again, these are my tri-blend markers, and you could just colour them in sort of regularly, doing your sort of shading and things like that. You can also use your watercolour. You could leave them just as black and white images. The possibilities really are sort of endless of what you could do with these. So that was just a really quick demonstration of how you could just colour that in using your alcohol markers. But for my final cards today, I want to sort of do something a little bit different. So I'm going to be using these Spectrum Noir Sparkle pens. So these were actually given to me from my nan, so I'm not sure sort of how current they are. I know they are still doing the Sparkle pen range, but I'm not sure about these particular colours. So I'm going to use these to colour in my images just a little differently. So they are quite inky. You can squeeze them to get a little bit more ink out of them, but obviously don't squeeze them too hard because quite a lot of ink comes out of them, as I've had experience doing this. So all I'm going to do to colour these images in is just to put a little bit of colour down. I still want you to be able to see some sort of white behind it, so I'm not sort of filling in the whole of the image. I want it to be a little bit arty, just something a little bit different, and just to sort of give the images a slightly different look. I love these pens. I think they create some really beautiful images, and like I said, I think they're really great using them in this kind of arty way. I'm not trying to colour too perfectly with them, so if I go out the edges, I'm really not that worried about it. So let's go ahead and pop a card together using the elements that we've created in this video. So I've got my blank white card base. I've taken one of the patterned papers from the set, so I'm going to use this checkered side. Got a blank piece of white cardstock that we're going to put our flowers and mason jar onto. So again, we've got one of the jars that I've stenciled to decorate the jar itself, and we've got a whole bunch of our stamped and cut images of our flowers. So we're going to be using some of the foliage and mainly this bunch of flowers here. We've got a piece of crocheted ribbon, and we've got the sentiment, we age not by years but by stories, go and make some. I really especially love those jars with that stenciled pattern on it. I think they look absolutely brilliant. So let's put together a really quick and easy card using all of our products. I think all the products work super well together. The patterned papers, not sort of traditional patterns or colours that I would use, but I do really like them. I love the size of the mason jar. As you can see here, I'm sort of really packing those flowers in. I want it to be like a really nice, big, fresh bunch of flowers. And I think this set would be perfect for Easter, Mother's Day, anniversaries, birthdays, get well soon cards. I guess pretty much any occasion. Here's our finished card, and I do just really love it. I love the flowers and the way they look together. I think they go really beautifully together. I love the mason jar and the fact that we decided to stencil onto it just to decorate it. I think it's made it a lot more interesting. So as you can see, we've got our final card on the left, and on the right, just another card that I put together. So again, this is just using a couple of the flowers and the foliage, and again, we've decorated the mason jar. I just think this month's gift is absolutely brilliant. I think it's a real valued addition to your craft stash, and I think you'll be pulling it out for lots of different occasions. So issue number 204 gets a massive thumbs up from me. Speaking of thumbs up, if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and a comment below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks very much for watching. Stay safe and happy crafting.